Tonight, NewsNation with a first look at the U.S. Border Patrol strategy for the next few years. What's in the plan and what agents on the front lines along the southern border are telling us. It comes amid the ultimate nightmare, a middle schooler murdered by two illegal immigrants. Also this evening, our first breakdown post-Trump conviction. Who's gaining? What the numbers are showing. Plus, an unusual announcement. The U.S. Summer Olympics moving east. Why LA's financial pain is potentially going to be Oklahoma's gain. And New York's governor suggests that flip phones just might be the way to go in schools. One expert who just ditched his smartphone for a flip phone shares what he learned. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, two families dealing with unimaginable devastation. Authorities now saying two Venezuelans who crossed into the country through the southern border are the men responsible for killing 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungary. Jocelyn's body found in a Houston creek after she was last seen at a local convenience store. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement say Johan Rangel Martinez and Jose Ramos had been apprehended by Border Patrol earlier this year, but were then released with a notice to appear before a court. And in Maryland today, Victor Martinez Hernandez, an immigrant from El Salvador who entered through the southern border, appeared before a judge. He is accused of killing Rachel Morin, a mother of 5.
He seemed not remorseful at all. So that was kind of tough too, you know, for me to hear everything that he's been charged with, and didn't even faze him.
Now, earlier today, our Allie Bradley got the first look at what the U.S. Border Patrol is describing as its strategy for this year and all the way out until 2028. Now, the strategy calls for what you might consider some rather obvious objectives, like securing the border, identifying threats, trying to influence the operating environment, and gaining better trust with the public. It also calls for strengthening foreign partnerships and intelligence sharing with our allies. Allie joins us live once again along the southern border. Allie, you got your hands on this strategy earlier today, the first one. I'm wondering, the folks that you talk to day in and day out there, Allie, what are they telling you? And as someone who's there every day, I'm wondering what stood out to you.
Yeah, hey, Blake, obviously we see this roll out and we're like, okay, what's in there? We've been covering this for 3 years. What could we possibly see that might be different here? Of course, you mentioned a couple of things there, one of those being that they are trying to double down on strengthening those relations with these foreign nations because we know there are significant gaps in our intel when it comes to our vetting process. So I talked to several agents about their take on this quote-unquote new strategy for 2024 through 2028. And some of the agents, what they say is that they support their current chief, Jason Owens. They like that he is an advocate for agents, that he is a good voice for them. But they say at the same time, it is a joke when they can't talk about delivering consequences, because there aren't any consequences, is what my sources are saying. They're saying that the strategy is all BS because there aren't any consequences, which is what their biggest issue is that they're experiencing right now. They arrest somebody and they release them into the country. They're not releasing them with those consequences. So one agent says, quote, that management in D.C. is completely out of touch, saying in Border Patrol, we are the lowest of the low. We are grunts on the ground. We follow footprints, tackle, and put in handcuffs. D.C. leadership has no clue what's going on in the border. Management, not the cartel, is our biggest enemy. Now, of course, some of them cautiously optimistic here, Blake, saying that they're for whatever management is going to do as long as it's a change in the positive direction and puts them back out in the field. They want to be out there apprehending the individuals who don't want to be caught, right? These individuals that have criminal history that are trying to hide. That is what agents on the ground believe their job is. We've even heard Chief Jason Owens saying that they want to get back to the mission of securing the border. And then we see this directive where their number one goal is to secure the border, which indicates that the border is not so secure, Blake.
Allie Bradley, best in the business along the southern border, once again live for us down there on the border. Allie, thank you. Joining us today here on The Hill, Chris Steyerwalt, host of The Hill Sunday, senior fellow as well at the American Enterprise Institute. Denise Gitsum is that's Congresswoman Laurel Lee. Denise Gitsham is a Republican strategist, NewsNation contributor as well, and Amisha Cross is a Democratic strategist. I'll get to you all in a second. Congresswoman, I was told we might have to wait for you for a few moments, but here you are, so let's start with you. And thank you for being with us here on the Hill. You just heard there from Allie. D.C. leadership has no clue. You are a Congresswoman in Washington. You say what to that strategy that was just unveiled that Allie got her hands on first, and to what you heard from her there?
Well, look, the first thing that we need to do is focus on absolutely securing the border. And what we see from the Biden administration in recent weeks is new executive action, but it's not action that's actually going to stop the flow of people coming in illegally. So, we know that the policies that have been implemented with respect to parole and these alternatives to detention are not reviewing cases on a case-by-case basis. They're not ensuring that we know who the people are or that they're coming here and following through an orderly process in our courts, or most importantly, going back to remain in your country of origin or remain in Mexico before coming across. So until such time as we just stop this madness, get back to focus on controlling the points of entry, controlling and securing the border, things, I think at this point there's large bipartisan support for some of the concepts like building a wall and just putting an end to the lawlessness down there. So all of these other things really aren't going to get to the root of the problem.
I hear you outline it, and obviously you're no fan of the president, but, the reality is, Congresswoman, that if we just step back here 3.5 years, the president instituted a policy, no doubt, that was more welcoming at the southern border. Here in Washington, Democrats and Republicans have got nothing done as it relates to the border. And that put the president to the point, both of those, to where he then had to take this executive action, and he did so, I would note, just a couple weeks before a debate. Isn't the reality, and I hear you on the president, but isn't the reality as well, Congresswoman, that Congress has failed?
Actually, no. And I would point out that I believe it's been about 400 days since the House of Representatives actually passed the Secure the Border Act, which was the most important
you passed H.R. 2, so Republicans... Republicans passed H.R. 2. Democrats had their own thing. I know the back and forth, but at the end of the day, and this is an issue that's been talked about for decades, isn't it incumbent at this point in time when we see these stories now time and time again? My gosh, we are talking about a 12-year-old girl, Congresswoman. Isn't it incumbent upon Congress to come together and do something?
Well, let's be clear. Beginning 3.5 years ago, President Biden had a choice. And when he stopped building a wall and when he put an end to remain in Mexico, that is what led to the flood where we are now. So he has had tools and the ability. Border Patrol agents explained to us that 70% of the flow across the border would stop with just those two changes. That being said, you're right. Congressional action would take that absolutely out of the play of the executive agencies. So congressional action, absolutely. And Republicans have been working on this and pushing this and fighting for this throughout my entire tenure in Congress. So you're absolutely correct. These stories are tragic. One of them is too many. And this is exactly the consequence when we won't control and we won't enforce our own laws at the southern border.
Let me leave you with this. There's, for our audience who's watching us here, Congresswoman, on NewsNation or listening to us on SiriusXM, the reality is, and I think you would agree with this, that there's no coming together, no solution before the election and until we learn who the next president is, right?
Well, look, what I see is really too little too late. So President Biden now realizes how incredibly unpopular this catastrophe is touching every community in America. I think he now realizes that this is a bipartisan issue that Americans, regardless of their political party, political background, want to see this solved. So I think that's why we're seeing a change in course now. That's why we're seeing finally the White House try to engage and try to do what they can. So, I'll say Republicans stand ready, as we have. Since day one of this Congress, Republicans stand ready. And so, as soon as Democrats want to come along and support, H.R. 2 is still sitting on Chuck Schumer's desk. So it's ready to go as soon as the Senate will take action.
Congresswoman Laurel Lee from the state of Florida, member of the Homeland Security Committee, I should add as well. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Talk to you soon.
Always great to see you.
You got it. With us again, Chris, Denise, Amisha. Here's what's so frustrating, Chris. We talked about, Denise and Amisha and I talked about this yesterday. Left this studio at 7 Eastern, got to my house at 8 Eastern, opened up my phone, and we found out a 12-year-old girl had died, and it was at the hands of two people who had crossed the border. We knew who they were. We let them go, and she's dead.
So
and yesterday we were talking about Rachel Moore, a mother of 5 from Maryland.
And
the same thing.
And if you had a Democratic Congresswoman on instead of Republican, she would be talking about the mass shooting that took place at an Arkansas grocery store today, and be talking about gun control. And immigration is yet another issue in which we clearly know what the public wants.
Right.
It is unambiguous for decades that Americans want the laws to be enforced, they want security, and they want a pathway to citizenship for those who have been here illegally but haven't committed other crimes. The Democrats have one part of it. The Republicans have the other part. And the chocolate never gets in the peanut butter, and Congress never comes together and gives America what it wants, because it is not in the interest of either party as things are currently constituted to solve the problem. And that is a dysfunctional system at its core.
So we asked the White House, Amisha, for a statement today. Here's what they said about this 12-year-old girl, Jocelyn Nungary. Quote, "Our hearts go out to the family and loved ones of Jocelyn Nungary. We cannot comment on law enforcement cases, but fundamentally anyone found guilty of this type of heinous and shocking crime should be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law." End quote. I would note that the White House often talks about law enforcement cases, chooses clearly not to on this one. They do not have an answer for stuff like this, Amisha.
Well, they don't respond to active and ongoing law enforcement investigations under any circumstances, but particularly when you have multiple realms of government that have to be involved. That's not necessarily new. The administration, the Bush administration did the same thing when we had a handful of extremely heinous crimes that happened at the border under his administration as well. That type of statement isn't exactly unusual. What I do think, and to Chris Stirewalt's point, is 100% correct, is that there has to be a pathway to citizenship, especially for those who have been here, have not committed crimes for a very long time, have devoted themselves to this country, pay taxes because they are taxed. And there also has to be mitigation for those who are crossing the border illegally, who are also committing crimes. To be fair, even though we talk about this on this channel, I've heard it on other networks as well, we don't want to speak as though everybody who is crossing the border undocumented migrants are people who are committing murders, because that's not what's happening. However, in these heinous cases, there needs to be more vigilance. And if that means more funding for Border Patrol, ensuring that we also get rid of the backlog that's currently there. I know that there was a bill on the table, which Republicans actually were the orchestrators of, that at the call of Donald Trump, we let go of. That is what happened. And it would have, in effect, allowed for more Border Patrol agents, would have allowed for a reduction in a lot of the cases that are currently backlogged. This is an example of something that's extremely heinous, but it's also one of a fundamental breakdown of our system.
We are going to hear Donald Trump, he's already tipped his hand, talk about this at the debate six nights from now.
No doubt. I mean, he'd be ridiculous not to. This is the ultimate politicization of the issue that we just addressed. What Chris Stirewalt said was absolutely right. I mean,
I like this trend.
Yes. No, you're so right.
Bipartisan.
Nothing new.
Amisha pushing back on me and then
I like the trend.
There's no incentive for people to come together and work together and solve the problem. And I would say that, look, there are 100 more executive orders that President Biden can take to reinstate the things that happened under Trump that would make our border secure now. That's unquestionable. I think Democrat or Republican, we can all agree that that's possible, and it's entirely within his power. My concern is that when we see we're seeing that the people on the ground who work under the management, they see no political will to get this fixed.
They basically told Allie DC is a joke.
Right, exactly. And so when there's no political will to make it fixed, because when they say our job is to secure the border and do X, Y, and Z, I think that they should just say our job is to do our job and enforce the will of the people as stated in our laws. Right. And so if there's no will to do it, it doesn't matter how many laws you pass or how much money you give them. It's not going to happen, and that's what needs to be fixed fundamentally.
All right, still to come here from the Hill over the next 46 minutes or so on this Friday afternoon. What's taking so long? Jesse Weber joins us on the other side of the break with why we haven't heard yet from the Supreme Court on what will turn out to be the biggest case yet for Donald Trump. We thought it was going to come this week. Nope. Plus, we knew the 2028 Olympics would be coming to a town near you if you live in California, but now we are learning who else will get in on the action. More than 1,000 miles away, and we've been waiting for it. Stirewalt has the numbers that show who is gaining and dropping off You're a
got a little something for you.
The self-proclaimed poll snob. You got the numbers. You got the numbers that you want post-Trump conviction, and you're going to break it down.
We're going to break it down. We're finally going to give it to you.
Coming up here on The Hill. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, we are still awaiting a Supreme Court ruling on Donald Trump's immunity case. Come on in, NewsNation legal contributor Jesse Weber, host as well on the Law and Crime Network. All right, Jesse, happy Friday. Thanks for being with us here, 6:20 on the East Coast. So we thought this immunity ruling, which is maybe the biggest court case of the year, bar none, for Donald Trump, would be here by now. It's not. And every day that this goes by, it's a small victory for Donald Trump, is it not? So why hasn't this happened? And when will we get it?
I think because what you just said, it's one of the biggest decisions that they're going to come out with. And the easy answer could be right there, just trying to buy Donald Trump time. They're just trying to help him any which way we can. I don't think that's it. I think they realize how monumental this decision is, how novel it is. And I've said it before, they're not going to grant him blanket immunity. They're going to go somewhere in between. And whether that means providing some sort of test to determine what acts are private, what acts are official, what he can be prosecuted in, what he can't. I think it's going to have a major impact. So they're probably waiting to the very end before recess before releasing what is a very monumental decision.
Is that next week?
I think so. It could also be, beginning of July, because they are going to go to recess. But I think that's what we can expect, if you ask me.
All right. Meantime, at another Trump trial in New York, the district attorney there, Alvin Bragg, is asking the judge to extend Trump's gag order, citing a deluge of threats. What about it, Jesse? Is he right to do this? Does there still need to be a gag order?
So the gag order made sense during the course of the trial to preserve the integrity of the trial, right? Now we're coming up, you could say, look, we haven't fully resolved the case. There still is sentencing. But when is that, if you're talking about credible threats, that's not going to just end right after sentencing. Are you going to keep it in place, especially if it's a sentence that Donald Trump supporters do not agree with? That's gag order just going to be kept in place? So that's a difficult question for Judge Rashan.
When does that come off? Like, can he keep that on for not eternity, right? I mean, at some point you got to take that thing off.
I haven't seen that happen where you have a gag order just on eternity. Now you could say Donald Trump has this sway unlike any other people, and he's attacking, court clerks' families like we haven't seen. But at the same time, he does have a right to speak out about this, like other criminal defendants who are not happy with the verdict or sentence. So I have to imagine after the sentence, it will probably go away.
All right, let's move down south to Florida. Lawyers for the former president argued that the appointment of the Justice Department prosecutor, Jack Smith, who charged the former president with hanging on to those classified documents at his Florida estate, the Trump team is trying to say it's unconstitutional, or at least the length that he has stayed on this case is unconstitutional. Are they right here, or do they have a case here? And do you really think Jack Smith is going to get thrown off?
I don't think so. Look, Donald Trump is not the first defendant to try to say a special counsel's appointment is invalid. The courts continually side with the government on this. But remember, this is in front of Judge Eileen Cannon, who I think a lot of people say she's made rulings that are favorable to Donald Trump. She spent a lot of time on this issue today and moving into Monday. She's had non-parties actually argue in front of her about this. And remember, Donald Trump didn't make this argument in front of the other judge for the other federal case. He made it in front of Judge Cannon, which is interesting. It seems almost he feels that she is going to be sympathetic to this. But based on some of her questions today and based on just the law of this, it seems, if you ask me, that it really doesn't have much legs, that Jack Smith, attorney generals have a lot of discretion on who they appoint for a special counsel position.
Jesse Weber, NewsNation legal contributor, joining us live from his home office. I think it is, Jesse. Thank you, my man.
I do what I can when you need me. When you need me,
there we go. I'll take it. Jesse Weber. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
All right. I guess the bottom line here, let's go back to the first one there. The bottom line is we're only, Amisha, getting one Trump case most likely before the election. Democrats have been hoping that there was going to be four. we're getting one, and I think it's the sentencing now in, 15 days or so.
I think some Democrats were, some Republicans were. That's why they were holding back their funds until now it has appeared that none of that's going to happen, so let's fund the last man standing. But I think that, it became painstakingly clear that a lot of Trump's delay tactics worked. It also became painstakingly clear that he has a friend in Judge Eileen Cannon. And at this point, we have not seen even the case where he was convicted of 30-plus felonies actually make a darn bit of difference when it comes to his polling numbers. He's actually used that to fundraise. He's used it to incite his base, and he's still out here polling pretty strongly if polls are to be believed. So I'm not sure, even if all the rest of these cases came up, if any of them would have triggered anything that would have prevented Donald Trump's base from showing up. Now, I do think it does affect the undecided voters and the moderates as well as the swing votes.
If polls are to believe, it's like she's taking a swipe at you there, Steph.
I'm not taking it personally. I'm basking in the bipartisan compliments that I heard earlier in the show. I'm going to stay right there.
But the reality is that is just that, right? Like, this is it, and now it's on to the debate next week, the issues, and then voters are going to have to figure out what.
And I want to say that one of the advantages of being old is that the Supreme Court doesn't do the hard decisions first. They don't do the hard. They are like a bird that fouls its nest before migrating, right? So they wait until the last thing that they do on the way out the door, and they say bye,
right.
And they fling the most controversial decision, and then they all head for the mountains.
Right. This is, I think, later than traditionally normal for when the court breaks.
It is, but
it's a little DC-ish. This
is the expected outcome.
I mean, they did this last year. What was it with affirmative action student loan debt? It was 2 days before July 1st, so they're waiting.
Yep, they're waiting to the end. All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Steyerwalt is going to break down. You've been waiting for the good batch of polls.
We got the good polls.
You got the good polls, and we're going to look into. So there was this question, like, how is the conviction of Trump? Is it going to help him, hurt him, independence, all that? You're going to sort through it.
Oh, we got surprises
coming up on the other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So we know that Alvin Bragg is the New York County District Attorney, but does he also now hold the title of potentially being the greatest bundler in the history of politics? Yes, he brought the New York case against Donald Trump when others passed. Yes, he got the conviction he sought, guilty on all 34 counts. And yes, that then led to a monster payday for Donald Trump's campaign, and now we know how much. The Trump campaign, combined with the Republican National Committee, announced it raised $141 million in May. That's $56 million more than President Biden and the Democrats. Now, that number, by the way, is nearly identical to the $53 million the Trump campaign says was raised in just the 24 hours following the former president's conviction. Timothy Mellon, the billionaire whose lineage traces, by the way, back to Mellon Bank, we are now learning as well, donated $50 million to the PAC supporting Trump. By the way, the Winklevoss twins, Cameron and Tyler, they have now donated $2 million in Bitcoin to support Trump as well. On the other side of the aisle, we also now know that Michael Bloomberg, you know the name well, donated nearly $20 million to help support President Biden's reelection. All right, so besides the conviction's impact on fundraising, there is now more of an indication of how it may have impacted the race at the top of the ticket in the key battleground states. Steyerwalt is here to break it all down. Chris?
Okay, so we are at this pivot point in this election, right? We are right before the first of two presidential debates, and we are right after Donald Trump's criminal trial. So this is a good inflection point. Now, the problem, and you all know this because I complain about it endlessly, there's not enough good polling out there. There's not enough of the primo stuff that I like to give you. But the folks at Fox News, who, whatever you think of the Fox News product, their polling is it's great because they have a bipartisan team that does it. And I admire their work. So take a look at Donald Trump's polling before and after the conviction. Donald Trump and Joe Biden's before and after. What do you notice there that's very significant? So Biden's up 5 points. Trump is basically exactly the same as he was. So we've been talking about whether or not there would be a consequence for Donald Trump. There was not a consequence for Donald Trump from this trial, but there was for Joe Biden. And Joe Biden's numbers are up. Why are Joe Biden's numbers up? Well, look at here. Here's the state level numbers. This is polling done for Emerson College in conjunction with thehill.com. And you see not a ton of change here, but you see that uptick for Biden, that little bit of uptick for Biden. Pennsylvania, the most important state this cycle, 43 to 45. Okay, Trump basically the same. What's the deal? You know the deal. Donald Trump's at his ceiling. Donald Trump's never going to get 53% of the election, right? He's never going there. That's not in his story. He's close to his ceiling, but it's close. It's a ceiling that's high enough for him to win. He can most certainly win. Joe Biden is underperforming his own numbers. He has not been doing as well. Here's my hot take, my medium hot take, which is having Donald Trump in the news every day for a couple of weeks and emphasizing the fact that he is a convicted felon took these marginal Biden voters, these folks who were saying they were undecided, took these folks who said, well, maybe I'll vote for RFK Jr. Maybe I'll write in Peppa Pig. Those people said, I got to do it. The election is on. And what we're seeing, and this is what we will continue to see, this debate that we're going to have next week is 3 months early. It's the earliest presidential debate ever. And it's the earliest presidential debate ever by 3 months. So what we're having is the typical squeeze on the last group of voters, but we're having it in June instead of September and October. And that's what you're seeing in these numbers.
Steyerwalt breaks it down.
I did it.
What's Biden's ceiling?
Oh, 53, 50.
Oh, so you think it's that his ceiling is higher than Trump?
Way, way higher.
Okay.
Now, Biden's floor is lower than Trump's.
Right.
Trump lives in a very narrow space, right? His floor is 43 and his ceiling is 47, 48. Whereas for Biden, as we've seen, he could... And the last thing you always have to remember, I just should say it as a caveat every time, when you're talking about national polling, to win the presidential election, Joe Biden, it's not enough for him to win by 1 point. He has to win by 3 or 4 points in order, because remember, the swing states are less Democratic than the country as a whole. So if you're looking at national numbers, if a winning election for Biden looks like him winning by 3 or 4 points.
You concerned about the uptick for Biden? As Trump talks more?
Concerned as an American or as a Republican?
No, as a Republican. Like, I wonder, when you look at that, like, you don't want to see that. So do you think it's a moment in time? I mean, polls are trends.
This is what I think. Is for the truly undecided voter, which, look, I simply cannot relate. I'm as partisan as they come, and I'm dyed-in-the-wool Republican. So, but I would imagine that for a truly undecided voter, this ping-pong back and forth, every little thing is going to play them back and forth. I think you're going to see the bump after a debate. I think that's going to work to Trump's favor. I think you're going to see a bump after both conventions. Both sides will get a little bump. So this is not over. Okay. It's not over.
No, I agree with that. I don't think that it's over. The polls have shifted in interesting ways since the dawn of this election cycle. At this point, it's kind of frustrating. I do think that the American public is still looking for that bang moment. For Joe Biden, he's got a record to run on. It's not necessarily always being translated in the strongest way. And I also think that it's reaching out to base Democrats. There are a lot of younger voters who are disengaged with this election cycle. That doesn't mean that they're voting third party. A lot of them are choosing to stay at home and not vote at all. That same thing, I think, affects black voters, which have tried and true Democratic-based voters. Right. They're not transitioning to Trump. They're not transitioning to RFK or Peppa Pig. They're transitioning to the House. And that's a scary place to be.
We don't have Peppa Pig polling, but I want to show you, because I wanted to ask you about this, to Amisha's point, the DDHQ polling. Here's something just from a very 30,000-foot level. Show it if we can. Because here's what I've noticed. So blue is Biden, red is obviously Trump, and then the lower line there is RFK Jr. So there's a clear line there for RFK Jr., right? From basically like somewhere around, 15 to somewhere around 8. So as he's gone down, Chris, over the last handful of months, few months or so, you see the blue line go up. How much of that, and there's been a question, right, of RFK, who does he pull from and how much from Trump and how much from Biden? Are we getting now evidence as Biden's numbers tick up? And maybe it has to do with conviction and Trump being, up front. But is this evidence that, okay, when they go from RFK, they're going to Biden, or conversely the other way?
Well, we have to remember that we are weird. We are deeply and profoundly weird because we're thinking about this stuff all the time and we're talking about it all the time. And I'm in the numbers and I'm looking at all this razzmatazz. Normal humans who are going about their lives hear, I hear Bobby Kennedy's son is running for president. Well, maybe he'd be good. He might be all right, says a normal person who is loving their family, doing their work, engaged in their community, and being alive as a normal human in the world. And then, so this is the simplest way I can put it. And Amisha is 100% right. There are way stations along this path to November at which voters are told, okay, it's really, really happening. This is really, really happening. And at those little check-in moments, and I think Trump's trial was one of those, this debate will be another one, that more voters go, okay, I was hoping that I would close my eyes, and when I turned around, it would be two different candidates, but it's going to be these two guys.
And voter enthusiasm, let's not underestimate that. The gap is still huge between Trump voters and Biden voters, and you spoke to this issue. And what if it snows on election day?
Yeah, I say it all the time.
And they just don't want to go out and vote for Biden. That's going to work for Trump's
favor. Rains in Georgia or snows in Pennsylvania, who knows? That's why when people ask me, who do you think's going to win? I'm like, I don't know what it's going to look like in November or on election day. Yeah, come talk to me then. All right, still to come here on the Hill on NewsNation. The governor of New York thinks maybe it's time to get the smartphones out of schools and replace them with flip phones. So what might that look like? Coming up, we speak with an expert who just did the unthinkable. He got rid of his smartphone and used a flip phone for a month. So what was that like? You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation.
Thursday starting at 8. It's Debate Night with Chris Cuomo. At 9, it's the CNN presidential debate simulcast on NewsNation. Then stay tuned as Abrams, Vargas, Vittert, and the best political team anywhere break it all down. Begins at 8/7 Central, Thursday on NewsNation.
5 days left until the 2024 Summer Olympics, set to take place in Paris. But 4 years from now, not only will we be dealing with another presidential election here in the U.S., but the Olympic Games will be underway right here at home in Los Angeles, throughout California as well. And just hours ago, get this, we learned another U.S. city will participate in the Games. Oklahoma City, 1,300 miles away east. Now, the mayor there of Oklahoma City announced the following on X, saying, "Today I can confirm that for the past 6 years, we've been working closely with the leaders from the committee and the city of Los Angeles to develop a plan to support LA's delivery of the 2028 Summer Olympics by hosting all canoe slalom and women's softball events in Oklahoma City." So if you're from that part of the country in 2028, looks like you're going to get some Olympics. All right. How about this question? Is it time to kick smartphones out of schools? Just get them out of there, get rid of them. The New York governor, Kathy Hochul, thinks so. The governor signed an historic bill called the Safe for Kids Act. She signed it into law. It requires social media companies to restrict, quote unquote, addictive feeds for kids. It bars notifications between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. It requires new age verifications, and companies can be fined up to $5,000 per violation. But she is not stopping there. The governor also saying she is looking into potentially banning smartphones in schools altogether, saying students could instead use flip phones. Remember that thing? Ted LaMotti recently spent a month without his smartphone and wrote about his experience. He came to this conclusion here. It's in his article on the website collabfund.com. He said, quote, "The case for keeping them out of kids' hands as long as possible is pretty damn compelling. After all, if adults are as addicted to them as they appear to be, what are the chances young and impressionable kids can fare any better?" Joining us now is the managing director of the Carnegie Institute for Science, Ted LaMotti. This was fascinating. I read it the other day. Thank you for being here. I immediately sent it to my wife. I was like, you got to watch this. So you basically, or got to read this. You basically said, get rid of the cell phone. You picked up a flip phone, and what'd you find?
Well, I have to explain quickly how I got to there. I was pulling out of my driveway one morning with my son, as I do every morning, and he turned to me, and as I was hitting Spotify, he said, "Dad, why do you look at your phone so much?" And it was a dagger because
I told them that's like the worst thing as a parent. When your kids say that to you, you're like, "Ugh," and you like crumple.
Well, and I knew I knew it was coming, but I was, I guess, subconsciously preparing for it. But I told him, I promise I won't do it as much. Like, someone on a crash diet, I did it for about a week.
Right.
And then I stopped.
Okay.
And I went back to my old ways. And then I read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. And after reading that in about 3 days, I said,
"You're done."
I'm done.
Right.
I'm done. And I said, the next day I went and bought a flip phone. And I did it for a month. And it was liberating. I was.
How do you buy a flip phone?
Where do you buy a flip phone?
You buy a flip. I went to an AT&T store. They told me they had none in stock, and the guy said, "Give me 1 second. I'm going to go dig really deep in the store." And he went and found one.
Okay.
And
sorry, go on. So now you're on this thing for like weeks at a time.
I'm on it for weeks at a time, and I'm less distracted, more aware, and honestly more aware of just how many people walk around like this and drive around like this. And then lastly, I was more engaged, most importantly, with my kids, my wife, my friends, and I honestly started calling people more. And so it was a liberating experience.
It's funny you say that because I remember like a point in time way back when, like 20 years ago, it was why would you ever text anyone? And now it's the total opposite. It's like, why would you ever call anyone if you could text them?
Don't start leaving me voicemail.
No, see, there you go.
Don't do it.
I wonder what you think of, like, having gone through this, the Kathy Hochul thing, right? Like, you think kids should have smartphones? Like, should we get rid of is it the smartphones? Is it the apps? Is flip phone the answer?
For me, it was, if I get distracted and disengage from things and people and work, then how are we supposed to let a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old do it? It must be infinitely worse. And I think the school day is probably the zone of time where they should be the most engaged with their teachers, their work, their friends, and we're giving them probably the most distracting device ever created.
We have to remember these are two different things, though. What Kathy Hochul and lawmakers in New York have done is not dissimilar to what Republicans did in Texas and Florida, and it's frankly unconstitutional, right? They don't have, you can't say speech only works if you meet these requirements in this state, and those things have already been worked out. But there's no argument that I'm aware of, and somebody's going to correct me here, that says that kids have a right to have phones in school. And I know at my kids' schools, you can't have your phone out at all during the day, and I don't know why that wouldn't be appropriate.
I think the tricky part is, I think nowadays we react by saying, let's restrict something or ban something. The solution here might be, let's find solutions for this. There are companies out there like, I don't know if you've heard of it, The Brick.
Yeah.
What happens if you partner with The Brick to find a way for kids walk into school, they brick their phone?
Yep.
Yeah. And they only can maybe receive phone calls.
Right.
Look for solutions.
Let me leave you with this. Did you go back to the smartphone?
I full admission, went back to the smartphone. But I will say, it is not the phone. It is the same phone that I had before, but it is not the same phone.
Right.
I have far fewer apps, and it is a grayscale phone. It is essentially a version of a BlackBerry in a smartphone form.
Cool. He is Ted Lamati. I read him on the blog. I told Ted when he came in here, he's got an article called Find the Savages, about what's happening with kids going into college and when they come out of college. I read Ted a bunch. Great to have you in.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you in person. He's a fascinating read. Ted Lamati. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Amazon, by the way, is ramping up its AI ventures with an apparent overhaul, get this, of the company's in-home digital assistant, Alexa. The upgrade will reportedly enhance Alexa's controversial abilities to create more natural interactions between chatbot and users. The new version of the AI-powered chatbot will reportedly include a 2-tier subscription model with the most expensive price tag between $5 to $10 a month. So there's that. Speaking of there's that and looking ahead, you've got the best Sunday show on television.
Totally.
The Hill Sunday.
Free. No subscription.
No subscription.
We give it to you for free.
You just spoke to Ben Carson.
We did.
Who is high up on Donald Trump's vice presidential list. He's going to be on the show this weekend. What'd you take away?
The Mick Mulvaney. I almost don't want Carson to get picked because then Mick Mulvaney would be too right. But yeah, he's in town for the Faith and Freedom Conference, so we went up and talked to him. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, here's part of Chris's interview with Dr. Ben Carson just a moment ago.
If he asked, you'd do. You would do it if he asked you to do it.
I would prayerfully consider doing that and asking God what is the best role for me in trying to save our country and to bring us back.
So that was the Dr. Ben Carson and Chris just a moment ago. As we talked about, he's high up on the VP list. Why do you think he's getting there?
I mean, watching him kind of bores me to tears, honestly. Like, I think that he's such a remarkable human.
Thanks for selling the show.
Sorry, no, I think it's
Come
great.
on, you gotta
I'm
riveted, Chris.
You're going to be a perfect counterpart, right? You're going to bring the heat, the medium heat,
there
right?
You go, medium heat.
But I think he's just, he's so loyal and he's so unambitious in the sense of, like, he's not challenging Trump for the spotlight.
Right.
And I think that's what Trump needs, because he can't have someone else stealing the spotlight. And he can't have someone who wants to take this empire, this Trump dynasty, away from his son. So he needs somebody who's older, who's calm, who can rally the conservatives. Right. And I think he fits the bill.
It is fascinating that all these years later, 8 years later, after the first run at Misha, he's still being talked about in Trump world.
He's still being talked about because he doesn't shake the apple cart.
Right.
He plays the game well. He is pretty unassuming. He is someone who can be a lackey, but he's also someone who is not aggressive out there. He's never said anything damaging to Trump. He doesn't go after him in any way, and he never will. So I think that he's somebody who's seen as a loyalist, but he's also a loyalist who doesn't really, stir up the crazies.
Mm-hmm. The Hill Sunday with Chris Steyerwalt, 10 o'clock Eastern, here on NewsNation. I watch it every weekend. Don't miss it. Have a great show, brother.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, but before then, and on the other side of the break, home prices. Have you tried to buy a home recently or even look into it? Good grief. New numbers out today. Leland Vitter, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, so before we say goodbye, some numbers, another headline that caught my eye. Good luck buying a home. Prices hit a record high in May, and existing home sales have dropped nearly 3% from a year ago. Here's, for example, one take from today, which shows, just show the tweet real quick, basically how a 30-year mortgage rate used to be 3.1%. The existing home price, $284,000 today. That same mortgage rate, basically 6.9%, and a median home price over $400,000. Put all that in the pot. Good luck, Leland. You're on the market, I think, right? Maybe?
No. Not that I know of. I'll wait for Rachel. Maybe you know. Maybe Rachel called you.
I thought you said you were on the market.